Get ready to witness the power of Blender packed into a web browser like never before. This is Verge3D. Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Grant, I'm the host of Remington Graphics. Today we're going to be taking a look at an add-on for Blender called Verge3D. Verge3D allows you to create projects in Blender and later export them to be used on your website or any other web-based application. In this video, I'm going to be going over the basics of Verge3D and giving you everything you need to know in order to create your own projects with it. We'll start off with the installation. First, open up your web browser and head over to soft8soft.com. This is who created Verge3D. To download it, click the Download Verge3D button in the upper right. This will take you to a downloads page, and then click the Download Verge3D button, which will start the download. It is a 260 megabyte download, so it's a little bit large and it'll probably take a few minutes to download. While you're waiting, you can go ahead and grab a cup of coffee, or hot chocolate if you don't like coffee. I don't like coffee. Anyway, my download just finished, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up. We'll exit out of Chrome because we won't be needing that, and I'm going to extract the Verge3D file to a location that I'll remember. I have a specific folder on my computer where I put all my add-ons and Blender assets, so I'll be putting it in that folder. Once it's done extracting, we can exit out of everything else and open up Blender. So now that we have the files on our computer, we need to enable Verge3D. I'll start by clicking File in the upper left and coming down to the User Preferences option. This opens up the User Preferences menu. If you're not already in the File tab up top, make sure you click on that. Then look down the list until you find Scripts. When you come to the Scripts menu, look all the way to the right and there should be a button that looks like a folder. Click that. And then go ahead and navigate to that same folder where you saved the Verge3D files from before. Go so far as opening the Verge3D folder, but don't open any of the files in there. Once you have the folder open, you can go ahead and click Accept. Now you can see that our directory has been copied right here. We'll click Save User Settings at the bottom of the window, and then we can exit out of Blender completely. But we're going to launch it right away again because we have to restart Blender in order to get it to work. Now, if I come up to File again, go into the User Preferences menu, and this time go to the Add-ons tab. At the very bottom of the categories list on the left, there should be an option that says Verge3D, and when we click that category, we can see the Verge3D add-on. If the box to the left of the add-on is not already checked, make sure you check it. This is how you enable the add-on. Now we can click Save User Settings, and our add-on is fully enabled. To access the Verge3D engine, we can come up to the top here where it says Cycles Render, or maybe it says Blender Internal or Blender Render. Select Verge3D off that list. Now we're ready to start working. One of the best things about Verge3D is that it has essentially zero learning curve when it comes to the actual building of a scene. It functions off of Blender, so anything you create in a Blender scene can be transferred over to a Verge3D scene, making it super easy, especially for those who are familiar with Blender. So for example, if I wanted to view this scene we have open right now, although it is basic, I can just come down to the bottom here and click Sneak Peek. This opens up a web browser connected to the local port that Verge3D is being hosted on. Say I wanted to make the scene a little bit more complicated. Well, I can add any shape I want. In this case, I'll add a monkey head, or Suzanne is the monkey head's name in case you weren't familiar with that. But I add that in Blender, and if I click Sneak Peek again, our web browser opens up, and we can now see that we have a monkey head in our scene as well as our starter cube. You can make these scenes just about as complicated as you want. Just keep in mind that the more faces you have in the scene, the longer it'll take to load. High poly count may also affect the frame rate of the client's computer when they're trying to load it if they don't have adequate hardware, but even then, I haven't run into any issues with things unless I'm going into absolutely insane amounts of polygons. So really, Verge3D is inclusive of just about anything you throw at it, as long as it's reasonable. Perfect, so now we know how to transfer a basic Blender scene into Verge3D. But what about materials? How do we add materials to something? Well, fortunately, that's also very easy with Verge3D. Verge3D is based off of the Blender internal material creation system, so anything you can create in the Blender internal system comes out in Verge3D just fine. Alright, so without any teaching at all, you already pretty much understand the concept behind Verge3D, so let's go ahead and try and create something. Now, I'm a big fan of drones. I don't know why, I just think they're one of the coolest pieces of new tech out there. So I want to teach people how to fly a drone with Verge3D. More specifically, I want to teach them about the difference between pitch, yaw, and roll. To do this, I'm only going to need 3 different things. 1, a model of a drone. 2, some basic arrow models to demonstrate directions, and 3, the puzzles feature of Verge3D. The puzzles in Verge3D is a form of visual programming that's really easy to use and allows you to do a lot of really amazing interactive things with your Verge3D project. We'll be looking into those more shortly here, but for now, let's go ahead and prep the drone model. So for the sake of time, I don't want to actually have to model a quadcopter myself, so I headed over to Sketchfab and downloaded an RC quadcopter model by Atul Kush. A link to this project and the Creative Commons attribution is available in the description. Once it's done downloading, I'm going to go ahead and open up the zip file it's in and extract the WRL file onto my desktop. By default, the WRL file type is not compatible with Blender, so we'll have to convert it into a .obj file. If you're on Windows 10, you can use the handy 3D Builder application that's built into Windows 10 to convert it. All you have to do is click these 3 little lines in the upper left, click Save As, change the file name, and then change it to an OBJ format. If you're on any other sort of operating system, there are plenty of online resources that allow you to convert WRL files into OBJ files with ease. Alternatively, you can just find a different quadcopter model. Doesn't matter which one you use, I just like this one. I'll switch the rendering engine over to Verge3D, delete everything in our startup scene, and import our new drone OBJ model from my desktop where I saved it. It is a little bit big for this scene, so I'm going to scale it down a lot and rotate it until it's in the proper position, which took a lot of tweaking because it was so out of scale, but now I've got it in a pretty good situation to continue working with it. So the second thing we need is those arrow models that I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to model those really quick. It's a very basic model. If you would like to follow along step by step and you want to use my arrow models, there will be a link down in the description that you can download those from. Although if you want to make your own or do something completely different, that's up to you. There's nothing special about the models. They're just models. Alright, so now I'm going to duplicate this arrow model for each of the axes of rotation that our drone has. We've already got pitch, so we're going to duplicate this and rotate it 90 degrees across the z-axis to give us roll. And finally, we'll duplicate another for yaw. Perfect, so now I'm going to add colors to each of these in the materials menu to correspond with the axis that they're on. So pitch is going to be green because it's on the y-axis, roll is going to be red because it's on the x-axis, and yaw will be blue because it's on the z-axis. I'm also going to scooch our yaw arrow up a bit because it's a little bit low in my opinion. So before we can preview this in Verge3D, we actually need to add a lamp so our object is, lit from an angle. So I'm going to add a sun lamp, and we also need to add a camera. So I'm going to add a camera really quick. And these two things are necessary for Verge3D to work properly. Once we have our camera in the scene and positioned, we can go ahead and click the sneak peek button, and we can see that we now see our model. Isn't that neat? Now by doing this, I can see that there are some things I'm going to change. For one, I'm going to change up the material colors of the drone because it's very gray and bland right now. I'm going to go for a black and blue vibe with it, with a little bit of white in there. And I'm also going to give it smooth shading. So I did exactly that. I changed it to black, and then I also changed the shading to smooth. And in the process, I also noticed that the model was split up into a few different parts, so I just joined these together to make it one big mesh. I did leave the propellers separate though, because I want to try and animate those for the final result. These small cosmetic changes made our model look way better, and I think it's time we do some basic animating. We'll be using these animations to demonstrate the different directions that it rotates in addition to the arrows. It makes things a little bit easier for the learner to understand. We'll start off by animating the propeller spin. Now, each of these propellers has the same origin as the whole drone 3D model, so I'm first going to set the origin of the propeller objects to its geometry. That way we can animate them properly. I can perform this action by pressing Ctrl-Alt-C and then selecting Origin to Geometry from the list. I'll repeat this action with all 4 propellers, and then we'll start animating. The actual animation task of these propellers is very simple. All I'm going to do is go to frame 0, set a rotation keyframe, then go to frame 5, rotate it across the z-axis 180 degrees, and then add another rotation keyframe. That's the entire animation for each propeller. I'm going to repeat this for all 4 propellers as well. And as you can see, all 4 of my propellers are now successfully animated. So there's still 2 things we have to do from here. For one, we have to parent all the propellers to the drone. That way when we move the drone, the propellers move with it, because we will be animating the drone. And second, we also need to change the interpolation of the propeller animation. So to do this, I'm just going to split my window here, open up the graph editor, select everything. Well, actually first I'm going to make sure all 4 of my propellers are selected. Then I'm going to select all the keyframes and press T, then select linear off the list. And this will give our keyframes a linear interpolation. That way there is no smoothing going on. Alright, up next we have to take into consideration some of Verge3D's animation settings, which are actually pretty useful. We can access these by going up into the Objects menu and scrolling down to the very bottom, and you can see we have Verge3D settings. And these are already set up perfectly for what we want with our propellers. For one, they'll auto start, they'll repeat the animation over and over, and they'll repeat infinitely, which is what we want, but not so much for the drone body. Since the animations for our drone are going to be responsive to the user's interactions, we want to set this to only happen once, that way it doesn't repeat itself over and over. So let's start animating our drone. To start off, we're going to set a base keyframe at keyframe 0. Then we'll go about 10 frames into the future, and we'll rotate it forward on our y-axis in this case, so the pitch 10 degrees. We'll insert another keyframe. Then we'll go about 20 keyframes into the future and rotate it backwards 10 degrees and rotate it backwards once again 10 degrees, or just backwards 20 degrees. Set another keyframe, 10 frames into the future, and reset it back to its default position. Next, I'm going to make a marker at the beginning by pressing M, then Control M to name it, and we'll name this pitch because that is what we are affecting. Now, if we play our animation, you can see that it rocks back and forth across the y-axis as though the pitch is changing. And this is the desired effect I'm going for. So I'm going to start with frame 40 this time, and we're just going to do the same thing this time except for roll. 10 degrees, 10 frames, 20 degrees, 20 frames, 10 frames, back to normal. And I'll repeat this across the z-axis as well for yaw. And now if we hit play from the beginning, we can see we have our pitch, roll, and yaw animations all working properly and as expected, with some nice markers for naming. I'm also going to shorten the timeline to 120 frames because that's how long our animation actually takes. If you have a longer animation or shorter animation, that's up to you. I'm not going to do anything else too fancy with the animation. I think this is good, so it's time to move on to puzzles, which is my personal favorite part of this project. Now, for all intents and purposes, our Blender file is still just a Blender project, and we can just preview it with Verge3D's engine. We need to actually convert it into a Verge3D project in order to use puzzles. To do this, we need to come down to the bottom here and click the App Manager button. This button opens up our browser, and we can see a bunch of pre-made Verge3D projects meant for demo purposes. In our case, we aren't going to be focusing so much on those, we're instead going to be creating our own. To create our own Verge3D project, we can come over to the right here and we can create a new project. I'm going to name my project Drone Instructional Demo, and then I'm going to leave the rest of the settings the same. Upon clicking Create App, it brings us to a confirmation page, and then we can go back to the main page by clicking the hyperlink on the screen. In order to open our Verge3D app, all we have to do is click the Blender icon in the same row as our app's title. And when it opens, all we have is a cube. And you may be thinking, wait, where did all my hard work go? That's because this is a different file, and all we need to do is transfer the files over. Since we aren't going to be needing any of the data in this Blender file, you can go ahead and delete all the objects and data one by one. Or if you're cool like me and have this awesome add-on called Atom Bomb, you can get rid of all the data from your Blender file with a click of a button. If you guys want to check out Atom Bomb, there will be a link down in the description. It's totally worth it. Next up, we need to append our data from our other blend file. To do this, we're going to come up to File, click Append, navigate to where our original file is saved. Mine was on my desktop. And then we're going to import all the data that we had. So in my case, all I had was a bunch of objects in my scene, so I'm going to import all of those. If you made any other data in your Blender file, such as worlds or node groups, I'd recommend importing those now as well. Otherwise, you'll have to come back later, and things might get a little bit messy. And upon clicking append, we can see that our objects have been successfully appended from the other file into this one. And while I have the chance, I'm also going to go through and rename all of my objects. They have kind of vague names such as NURBS Curve 001, and that's a little bit more vague than I'd like it to be. So I'm going to rename all of them according to what they are. This will help a lot with programming, so I'd recommend you do this as well. You can also save and close the Blender version of this file because we won't be needing it anymore. This next step is very important, and you'll have to do it no matter what your project is, so I'd recommend you pay very close attention to the next few steps. In order to actually save and utilize our project, we need to do two different things. First, we need to save it just like we would any other project. Press Ctrl S or File Save. And second, you need to click File, come down to the Export tab, and then select Verge3D GLTF file. This is the file that the Verge3D engine actually runs off of, so it's very important that you export this, otherwise your project won't update in your browser. Once you do this, we can reopen Chrome, either by clicking the app manager, or if you left the window open from last time, you can just click into it from there. And we can click the little puzzles icon next to our app. This opens up Verge3D's puzzle editor, and now we're ready to do some basic visual programming. Programming might sound a little bit intimidating to some, especially those of you without much experience, but Verge3D makes it very easy with their puzzles. So programming logic is very basic. It takes input and it gives output. In this case, our program is going to take an input, meaning we're going to click something in our scene, and it's going to give output, meaning it's going to show animation. So, in this case, what I'm going to have it do is if I click the green arrow, then it's going to play the pitch animation. If I click the red arrow, it's going to play the roll animation. And if I click the blue arrow, it'll play the yaw animation. I'm guessing this programming is going to be somewhat unfamiliar with some of you, so I'm just going to go through it step by step, explaining each thing that I do. I'm going to start by coming up to the events category here and selecting this loop that says, or I guess this event that says, when clicked, do this. So basically what this is saying is when clicked, we'll have a puzzle piece that plugs in here. So it says when this object is clicked, do, and then whatever is in this slot right here. So in this case, we're going to say, well, we have to click the green arrow. So I'm going to come over to the objects tab here, and I'm going to, actually, it might not be, it's a the selectors tab is what we want to go to. And you can see we have the select an object piece right here, and we can plug this in right here. And you can see that it snaps together and makes a nice clicking noise as well. And we can select whatever object we want. So in this case, this is the arrow for pitch, arrow pitch. As you can see, that's why we had to rename things. And it's already selected, which is nice. So what we want it to do is play a specific part of the animation. So we can come down to the animation tab. We can select this play animation blank from 0 to 1000 with the reversed option and when finished or whatever. We'll select this one, and then we have to give it an animation to play. The animation is in the selectors tab, just like our objects. So you can see select an animation clip, and we'll drag that into there. And so you can see it's playing the animation of drone, which is what we want it to play. The other options are the propellers, but we don't have any useful animations on the propellers other than the spinning one that they're already playing. So we'll play the drone animation from one frame to another. So let's go back to our Blender project here, select our drone, and see where the pitch animation happens from. And that happens between 0 and 40. So I'll go back into our editor here and change this from 0 to 40. Now I'll click save in the lower left to save our script and play. Now, when I click the green arrow, our animation plays and then stops. We can do this as many times as we'd like. So I'm going to replicate this same piece of code by selecting it. Actually, I don't know if you can select multiple things. Oh, yeah, you can. Okay, so if you select the biggest loop, then press Control-C and Control-V, you can duplicate all of the code relating to that loop or that event, which is really nice. So now I want to do roll. So roll is our next thing, and roll takes place between 40 and 80. So we'll do 40 and 80. Now if we save once again and click play, now we can have our pitch, and if we click the red, it'll do roll. And if we duplicate this one more time, we can do yaw, which is 80 to 120. Now once again, if we click save, play, now we do pitch, roll, yaw. Just like that, we can play any animation. If we want to interrupt it, we can't, unfortunately, but that's actually kind of nice in my opinion, because then you have to play the animation all the way through. But there you have it. Our script is more or less done. Now there are a couple other things that you can do with it. Actually, there's, a lot of other things you can do with this. Actually, so much so that I can't even go over it in this video because that's just how programming is. But there are plenty of demo files to investigate and plenty of other things you can play with Verge3D to get the desired outcome that you'd like. Now if we come into our app manager again, we can actually launch our scene by clicking the little blue icon to the side, and we get the full version of our application. So you can see now all of our code is running just like we made it, and it works just flawlessly. Now from here, we can actually embed this into a website or into any other sort of web-based application. So it's really great for educational content, or if you want to do something like build your own ring, I believe is one of the demos here. Yeah. So like for this example, you could, if you own a jewelry company, you can build your own rings with Verge3D and have people customize them and see what they like and see what looks good to them. It's got so much potential. It's hard to wrap it all into one video because there's so much you can do. There really is no limit to it. Anyway, that sums up just about everything for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and be sure to check out Verge3D if it's something that interests you. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Adios.